They sat across from you and said the words you had been waiting to hear. They saw it. They owned it. They were going to be different. And for a moment, maybe a long moment, you believed them. So the question is not whether people can change. The question is whether the specific traits that define the Dark Triad can change. And the answer the research gives is not the one most people want. It is not a flat no, but it is not a reassuring yes either. By the end of this episode, you will have the actual science, not the hope, not the worst-case panic, but the real prognosis literature. And you will have a clear picture of what to do with it. Here is where the science starts, and where most conversations about this topic stop short. In 2002, psychologists Delroy Paulhus and Kevin Williams at the University of British Columbia published the foundational paper establishing the Dark Triad as a distinct psychological cluster: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. 3 traits, 1 profile. What they also found was that these traits share a common feature beyond callousness and manipulation. They are remarkably stable across time. Psychological research distinguishes between state and trait. A state is temporary: anxiety before a job interview, grief after a loss. A trait is structural. It does not dissolve under pressure. It organizes how a person perceives the world, interprets relationships, and responds to threat. Dark Triad traits are traits, not states. Imagine someone who has spent 40 years organizing every relationship around dominance and extraction. Their partner leaves. They enter therapy. They learn the language of accountability. They can describe their behavior with clinical precision. The behavior does not stop. The description of it just becomes more sophisticated. This is the finding that Paulhus and Williams pointed toward, and that subsequent research in personality psychology has continued to confirm. A 2020 meta-analysis published in the journal Psychological Bulletin, covering decades of longitudinal data, found that dark personality traits show moderate to high stability across adulthood, comparable to other deep personality dimensions like conscientiousness or openness. This is where it becomes genuinely uncomfortable, and where the clinical literature says something that most channels skip. Therapy is not neutral terrain for someone with high Dark Triad traits. It can be useful, but it can also be something else entirely. Narcissistic personality has been studied in therapeutic contexts by clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula, whose 2 decades of research document a consistent pattern. Individuals with strong narcissistic traits often engage with therapy in ways that serve the same function as every other relationship in their lives. They perform insight. They acquire the vocabulary of self-awareness without the underlying structural change the vocabulary points to. Someone tells them they are emotionally unavailable. They learn to say in the next argument that they know they are emotionally unavailable, and use it to end the conversation. The therapy frame becomes a tool. For psychopathy, the research is even more direct. Studies on antisocial personality and psychopathic traits in therapeutic and correctional settings, including work by Robert Hare, who developed the psychopathy checklist, found that certain therapeutic approaches did not reduce harmful behavior. In some cases, high psychopathy individuals used therapy skills to become more effective at presenting as reformed. This is the part most people never hear. Change talk itself can be a manipulation strategy. The willingness to say, "I know I have a problem," is not evidence of change. It is evidence that the person has identified what you need to hear. Now, here is the part that honest science requires. The research does not say change is impossible. It says change is narrow, slow, and conditional in ways that matter. There is a distinction the clinical literature draws between trait reduction and behavioral management. Trait reduction, actually lowering where someone scores on narcissism or psychopathy measures, is rare and typically modest. Behavioral management, learning to suppress or redirect the behaviors that trait produces, is more achievable, particularly when the person has significant external motivation. That distinction is the key that most conversations about this topic miss entirely. A person with Dark Triad traits can, in specific circumstances, behave differently if the cost of the old behavior becomes high enough. if the new context provides clear reward structures for different patterns, if the trait expression is at the moderate end of the spectrum rather than the clinical extreme. But here is what the research cannot give you, and what you deserve to hear plainly. The trait does not disappear. The orientation toward dominance, toward extraction, toward self-preservation at others' expense remains the gravitational center. Behavior orbits it. Under pressure, under threat, under boredom, the orbit returns. If you have been told to be patient, if you have been told that this time is different, if you have been told that your love is the thing that will finally unlock the change, the science does not support that frame. Not because you are not enough, because the mechanism of change for these traits does not run through what you provide. So this is where the series ends, not with a verdict on a specific person in your life, with something more useful, a clear way to hold this. The first thing the science gives you is permission to trust the pattern over the promise. If the behavior across months and years forms a consistent shape, that shape is data. A moment of insight, even a genuine one, does not erase the shape. Watch the pattern. That is not cynicism. That is the most sophisticated reading of the research available. The second thing, your role is not diagnostic. You are not responsible for assessing whether someone with these traits can change. That is the work of a trained clinician across a sustained period, with real therapeutic stakes, in a controlled setting. Your responsibility is to assess whether the relationship as it currently exists is one you can sustain without cost to yourself. The third thing, and this is the one the Dark Triad series has been building toward across 8 episodes, the most protective stance is not suspicion, it is precision. You now have the full architecture. You know what the traits look like. You know how they operate. You know what the science says about their stability. That knowledge does not make you paranoid. It makes you harder to deceive. The people who study dark personality traits for a living are not pessimists. They are precise. And precision, not hope, not fear, is the thing that actually protects you. If setting a boundary could put you at risk, your safety comes first. A professional can help you plan a safe exit. You came to this series to understand something. You do now. That is not a small thing. If you recognized any of these patterns, watch this next. Knowledge does not change them, but it changes everything about how they can reach you.